Okay. Welcome to the Asian Leadership Conference.
It's great to be back with you all.
Thank you for coming back to sharing your insight and expertise on global issues. And there has been a lot going on since last year. So why don't we start with Ukraine? The Ukraine war is protracted and the conflict has been escalating recently. So what are your prospects for the war in Ukraine?
Well, you always have to go back to how it began. It began with Vladimir Putin deciding that he wanted to control more of Europe than he's ever going to control. And the good news is that the West is providing the weapon systems and the Ukrainians are fighting, risking lives, their country, but their work has been incredibly noble. My sense of this is the more we can do, the more we can provide them, the more quickly we can provide it to them, the more quickly this war ends. My biggest regret is that we didn't deter Vladimir Putin. We, the West, we were unable to put together a model in the tradition of Reagan and Thatcher and Pope John Paul II that convinced Vladimir Putin that the cost would be too high. And so here we are now over a year later, and you still have massive death and destruction. I was in Ukraine about 5 weeks ago. I took a trip to Kyiv to see President Zelensky. I must say, I was still incredibly impressed. In the same way that what we see in the news every day are the Ukrainians fighting in a very determined way. I was incredibly impressed not only to see his leadership, but of the Ukrainian people's willingness to continue to pursue this effort to protect their own nation and their own families.
Yes, it's been going on for longer than we expected, so it's very difficult situation, I guess. But the problem with the war in Ukraine seems to be that it's very difficult to imagine how it will end. So as someone who has met both Putin and Zelensky, what do you think is the best and realistic solution to this war?
Yeah, it's always hard to imagine how these things end. In the same way, it seemed unimaginable that you'd have a ground war in Europe. And so we need to stretch our imagination. I'm convinced that the Ukrainians will, in the weeks ahead, begin to press their advantage. I don't know precisely how that will move out. None of us do.
Right.
But I'm convinced it will put the Ukrainians in a better position when, in the end, there is a solution that convinces not only Vladimir Putin, but others who are watching in the world that wars of aggression will end badly, and that those who believe in human dignity, national sovereignty, basic human rights will prevail, that the world will rise up against dictators like Vladimir Putin who seek to destroy others. I can't tell you exactly when or how. I don't think these are largely unknowable, but we should make very clear that we are collectively, those of us who believe in those very ideas of private property, sovereignty, all those things that we all know intrinsically are right and decent, that we're prepared to help the Ukrainian people fight this fight.
I see. Do you think Korea should participate more?
I do. And I do in the following sense. These are difficult questions for nations.
Very delicate.
And very delicate. But we should always be clear as nations the things we stand for, because tomorrow it will be you. Tomorrow it will be some. Yeah, I mean Korea. Tomorrow it'll be some other country.
Right.
It could be the United States. It could be Canada. It could be tomorrow. There will be some authoritarian dictator who decides he can try and invade and take sovereign territory by force.
Right.
And we should all be mindful that so long as they're just asking for stuff, they're not asking for the Korean military, they're not asking for U.S. Marines.
Right.
They're simply saying, hey, can you provide us the tools? We're prepared to fight and die for our country. Yes, I hope every nation will continue to do more to benefit not only Ukraine, but the world is watching how the response to this regime is taking place, or how this attack from the regime is being responded to by the West. And we need to make sure that it is very clear that we're not going to allow them to pick one off and the rest of us just stand by and say, I'm glad it wasn't me this time.
Okay, very good. Recent news is that Korean President Yoon, his state visit to the United States has now been concluded. So what is your overall assessment of the state visit?
He was magnificent. And more importantly, the relationship between our two countries is now deeper and better. It's never necessarily about personalities and people, but leaders matter. And the work that President Yoon did on that visit was important. His speech to a joint session of Congress was remarkable.
In 1950, the Korean Peninsula was on the front line. Korea's freedom and democracy were on the brink. At that decisive moment, the U.S. did not look the other way. Korean and American soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder and fought bravely.
He thanked the United States for all we had done in Korea's time of need, to kind of bring it back to what we were just talking about, right?
Right.
There, I said tomorrow it could be you. Well, yesterday it was you.
It was us.
It was Korea.
Right.
And the United States came to provide a great assistance, and President Yoon was very gracious in thanking us. He also acknowledged it was important for the world, and that was certainly true. But I thought the visit was fantastic. His ability to really grasp the moment in a way that was very human, by singing an American song at the state dinner, and by being very personal and emotional and heartfelt in the way he spoke to the joint session, was unique and different and really important, and very well received, I think, all across the political spectrum inside of the United States.
So did you see him singing?
Yes.
The American Pie.
I did see him singing this famous American song.
우리 한미동맹의 든든한 후원자이고 주주이신 여러분께서 원하시는 한 소절만, 근데 이 기억이 잘 날지 모르겠습니다. 피아노로 그냥 연주만 좀 하십시오. A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I really felt my chains, that I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while.
It was really a special moment. The whole world got a chance to see this, and it was a little bit about singing an American song, which was really nice. But what it really said was how deeply he cared about the relationship between our two countries. I think that's what that communicated in a way that sometimes words just can't do, but he was open and he was lovely and he was decent, and this is what good leaders do. I thought it was truly remarkable and a lot of fun too.
Yes, and a surprise.
And I think everyone was surprised.
Right.
Yes.
And how do you evaluate the Washington Declaration?
Well, we'll see how it plays out. I think it is a good thing. I think the continued closer relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea matters an awful lot. Associated with that is the trilateral relationship with Japan, and President Yoon's doing a remarkable job there as well. But in the end, these agreements, we give them names, but what really matters is the execution. How is it that the two countries actually build out together, jointly, a deterrence model?
한반도의 지속 가능한 평화는 저절로 이루어지는 것이 아닙니다. 우리 두 정상은 북한의 핵 미사일 위협에 직면하여 상대방의 선의에 기대는 가짜 평화가 아닌 압도적인 힘의 우위를 통한 평화를 달성하기 위해 양국 간 확장 억제를 획기적으로 강화하기로 했습니다.
We continue to seek serious and substantial diplomatic breakthroughs with the DPRK to bolster stability on the peninsula, reduce the threat of proliferation, and address our humanitarian and human rights concerns for the people of the DPRK.
That will be seen by Chairman Kim in North Korea.
Right.
That will be seen by Xi Jinping in China, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. What will matter is in how the weeks and months and years ahead, we fill in the blanks in that commitment. And if we do it well, we will look back on the moment that this was announced as a very important step towards securing freedom here, not only on the Korean Peninsula, but for all of us.
I see. And I enjoyed reading your memoir. And
I'm glad.
After the state visit, North Korea issued harsh words, of course. They always do. But you wrote in your memoir that actually Chairman Kim Jong-un, rather welcomes the deployment of U.S. nuclear weapon to South Korea because it can deter China. So do you think North Korea would welcome the declaration?
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
And
Okay.
I'm not certain that Chairman Kim was being completely truthful in what he said to me.
Oh, okay.
So I do think this is true. I think Chairman Kim in North Korea is always playing some level of a game with his masters in China. He's completely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh.
In large measure, his degrees of freedom are pretty limited, empowered only by his nuclear weapons program. And I do think there's days for him that is tiresome and demonstrates weakness. And I think that the counterbalance, that is a capable, strong South Korea supported by American forces on the ground on the peninsula, is something that he always can hold out and say, but, you know, the Americans are there. No, I don't think he
really
appreciates. I don't think he for a moment would appreciate a stronger, deeper set of relationships, security relationships between the United States and the Republic of Korea.
Okay. And of course, South Korea, we seem to have used almost every policy we can use against North Korea in terms of denuclearization. And the thing is, nothing worked. So based on your experience, you met with Chairman Kim, of course. So what would be the most efficient way to deal with the nuclear weapons in North Korea?
So I'd give you 3 ideas.
Okay.
First, you're right. I spent an awful lot of time with Chairman Kim.
Right.
I got a chance to interact with him in a number of different settings, sometimes just myself, sometimes with teams,
Right.
sometimes with the President of the United States. What was pretty clear at this point is he was still in the mode where he believes his nuclear weapons program is the thing that continues to provide him with political power and security and regime continuity. And so step 1 is to convince him that in fact just the opposite is true, that many of the things that threaten him, that he worries about, will vanish were he to give up his nuclear weapons program. Second, the sanctions regime that was put in place at the beginning of the Trump administration is actually working. It is impacting the regime's ability to continue to grow not only its nuclear program, which we focus on, and the missile program, which we focus on, but his conventional weapon systems as well. Mm-hmm. And so we should make sure that we do everything we can to continue to enforce those sanctions, to deny North Korea the wealth, to greatly expand their capabilities. The final thing comes back to your question. You said nothing has worked. I would add only this. Nothing has worked yet. When the Soviet Union fell, no one anticipated it. These things have a way of, with good works over time, ultimately undermining these very tyrannies that we can see. The 25 million people, Korean people, people who live on the north side of the DMZ. Those 25 million people one day will have their lives vindicated. We don't know when that day will be, but it doesn't mean we should grow tired or weary or frustrated. It doesn't mean we should give up and simply accept a nuclear-armed North Korea separate and apart from the rest of the Korean peoples here in the South. We should continue to apply every pressure. We should continue to talk with the North Koreans when they're prepared to talk, to explain to them why this makes sense. And we should make sure to extend our deterrence model in a way that while we're waiting, while that day is still not upon us, that we reduce the risk that Chairman Kim one day will do something really dumb and attack South Korea.
And I just want to do one follow-up question on your first idea. You said we should convince Chairman Kim that nuclear weapons are only making things worse, not better. So who will be the most appropriate person to convince Chairman Kim? Like, should it be South Korea? I mean, in terms of country,
yes.
not the person.
Yeah, good. You know, I don't know. In some ways, it's not about the who, it's the what. Mm-hmm. You know, this is an argument. This is a logic stream that you have to convince Chairman Kim, and it's hard because we've watched people with nuclear weapons give up their nuclear weapons, and it's ended badly for them.
Yes, I remember some of them.
Yeah,
yes.
and by the way, that's true of lots of leaders who were authoritarian regimes treating their people horribly, and when they lose the capacity to control that, they are thrown out of power or jailed or worse.
Right.
And so it is a very difficult argument to make. But for Chairman Kim, he sits in a unique place. We would always remind him that we fought a war with Vietnam. The United States fought a war with Vietnam for decades. And yet today we are great economic partners, great friends. We share all kinds of information with them. They are important partners of the United States, and that North Korea could one day be in that place as well. And in the end, it's going to be for the people of North Korea to sort their way through this thing. And we need to make sure that we are applying pressure on the Chinese Communist Party too, to convince them to create the space so that Chairman Kim could one day make that decision.
Okay. Sounds not easy, but...
That's very difficult. But we should not lose faith. We never know when it'll happen. It might have happened while we're sitting here.
Okay.
Right? These things happen in a way that, that is, in the moment, unexplainable. You can't explain the timing of them. But it doesn't mean that the work that's been done over years and years and years won't one day lead to the result that we are all praying and hoping for.
Okay. Like, nobody knew you were visiting North Korea, right?
Very much the same
Yes.
way. Yes.
And going back a little bit to Washington Declaration, regarding the declaration, some say that, actually New York Times wrote that the US and South Korea in fact gave up on the denuclearization of North Korea, because it kind of implies that North Korea's nuclear weapons are there to stay. So do you think denuclearization of North Korea is still possible, or should we just go with the nuclear weapon?
No, it's not only possible, it's necessary.
It's necessary. And it is possible, you think?
Yes. And I've read the declaration. I know there are some in the Biden administration who think we should both acknowledge and accept North Korea's nuclear program. I find that deeply abhorrent and inconsistent with American national security interest. It would be a mistake to permit a rogue program, a sanctioned program, a program that doesn't comply with the IAEA requirements or any of the international norms and rules, to allow that to move forward and just say, gosh darn it, that's too bad, they have it, would tell every nation in the world that you too can have a nuclear weapons program. So it's bad policy both for the Korean Peninsula and bad non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation policy as well.
So we should keep pushing.
Yeah, every day.
Every day.
And we, all of us, Japan, South Korea, Australia, all the nations of the world who understand that nuclear proliferation presents enormous risks to the entire world.
I see. You mentioned a little bit about China, but now the dispute between US and China is, it has put Korea in a very difficult situation. The fact is that it's very difficult for us to confront either side, and it's really impossible to pick one side. So if you were the president of Korea, what strategy would you take regarding US-China conflict?
Yeah. So I would pick the side that was in the best interest of my own people. And what is that? That's the side that believes in human dignity. It's not about the side that believes in property rights, the side that says, boy, if you are attacked, we'll come help you. This isn't about choosing between China and the United States. This is about choosing what the people of the Republic of Korea want for their families and for their lives. The side that they should pick is the side for human decency. They should pick the side that is about progress, not authoritarianism. They should pick the side that says, no, we want families to be able to live their lives, not one that says, no, we're going to decimate your family by starving you to try and build out a silly nuclear weapons program, right? This is what the leader of South Korea and every leader all across the world should do. This isn't about choosing between China and the United States. This is about choosing for your country. What do you want the world to look like? Do you want it to look like a model where the surveillance state dominates everyone's life? Do you want it to look like a nation where you put 1 million people in concentration camps? Is that the world that you want for your country? And once you evaluate that, once you look and say, no, that's really what I want. I want to run a nation that's going to take a virus and foist it upon the entire world, killing tens of millions of people, and deny that it ever happened. I don't think that's what the leader of South Korea wants. And so I think this is actually not a hard question. It's difficult to figure out the economic piece of this. How do we get businesses to the right place? That is a real challenge. But as for which model is better for government leaders, I don't think this is a close call. We want a model that looks like what has protected the world and allowed the Korean economy to grow at rates that seemed unimaginable 30 years ago. We want that model for the world, for our children and for the grandchildren, and not a model that looks like what is happening inside of China today.
I see. So we should put value first, you think?
I would be ruthlessly self-interested for your nation. You should put you should put Korea first. In the same way that we put America first. And when you put Korea first, I'm confident I know how the nation will move forward because you're good and decent people.
Okay, thank you for saying that. And a little bit more about China. And China has now been playing like they want to be some kind of mediator, it seems, between Ukraine and Russia. And Mr. Zelensky and China, they talked on the phone to most people's surprise. So do you think China has some leverage on the issue?
None.
None.
Absolutely none. The Chinese Communist Party has chosen a side here. Right, they've chosen the side of Russia. They're getting discounted natural gas, discounted oil. He knows that Putin is in a weak position. He is now consolidating. Xi Jinping is now consolidating his capacity to control the Russian people and the Russian economy. No, there's no mediation that it's actually taking place there. This is the Chinese Communist Party doing what it does best, foisting propaganda on the world and pressuring a Russian regime that knows that it needs Chinese support.
I see. They talked on the phone when President Yoon was in the U.S., so we were wondering why. And we talked before that a lot of things happened since last year, and there seem to be a lot of disputes in the world, like Sudan and Yemen. So what do you think is the biggest danger in the world right now? What makes you most anxious?
You know, as an American, the things that concern me most are that we won't get things right at home. So that's very much an internal matter, that we won't teach our next generation about the greatness of our country, that we won't teach them to do math and reading and writing, all the things that that we've built our national understanding of ourselves and our economy and our place in the world on those things. So my biggest concern is that we won't do the things that give America its influence in the world. And I'd extend that. When America doesn't get it right, the world is worse off. The world counts on the United States of America in so many ways. And that is a burden to my country.
Right.
It is also an enormous benefit to our country as well. And so we should just own it. We should accept the Americans' role for leadership in the world, but we have to get it right at home. As for challenges across the world, I worry about governments that are beginning to move to the political left in a very radical way. We know where this leads. We know this leads to tyranny. We know this leads to less prosperous nations, more poverty, worse health conditions, less food security. There is a real danger of the appeal of the modern Marxist. Right. And so I'm worried about that as a political matter in many parts of the Southern Hemisphere, certainly in African countries, but South American countries as well. And then we today have a leader in China who's just fundamentally different than his predecessors.
Right.
And I hope that the world will begin to respond, not in a punitive way. I love the Chinese people. I want good things to happen to them. But Xi Jinping has begun to turn China in a much more aggressive, much more militaristic direction. And that presents real risks, not only to the United States, but people of Japan, of South Korea, of Taiwan for sure, and for those that have become dependent on Chinese money as well.
I see, and we cannot not talk about Japan in times like this. In Korea and Japan, we are known for not getting along well.
I lived that. Yes.
But recently, on my surprise, we are getting along pretty well. So how do you evaluate it, and do you think it will help the global community?
I think the fact that we now have shuttle diplomacy between Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon is stunningly good for the world. I know it's good for the people of South Korea and Japan, but it is stunningly good for the world as well. I lived these issues. I joked about that a bit ago. I was in the middle of it when tensions were very, very high. It was very difficult to even get my foreign minister counterparts in the same room together.
They won't talk.
It was very difficult, and the two countries weren't sharing intelligence. This was really bad for global security, and frankly, bad for the global economy as well. So I think this is a lovely turn of events. To your point, I don't know that was expected. I think President Yoon made a pretty bold decision, sometimes difficult in domestic internal politics. I completely get that. But it was bold, and it's what good leaders can actually do. And I'm convinced that the people of both nations will benefit from this openness that we didn't have just 3, 4, or 5 years ago.
Right. And do you think it will benefit the U.S. as well?
Oh, yes, most definitely. By the way, it will benefit everyone, people in the region, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Indians, the Australians. The whole world will benefit from a tighter nexus, a relationship, an open economic and security and diplomatic relationship between Japan and South Korea. It is an unmitigated good, and for the peoples of each of those two countries as well.
Okay, and at the Asian Leadership Conference, we invite very young people to watch this event. So you went to West Point, and you moved to the legal job, and you moved to business.
Right.
And now you are working for your country. So, can you give the young people here some advice on their career, like how to choose their life, for example? Because you changed a lot.
Yeah, no, I can't give them any advice on what to choose, but I can give them a couple of thoughts.
Right.
First, work hard.
Work hard?
Yes. I have seen successful, lazy people, but not very many. The truth is that one's willingness to work hard benefits everyone around them, themselves, the company that they're part of, the agency that they're working in government, their military team, wherever that may be. It benefits your team enormously. Then good things will happen for you as well and for your family. And so the willingness to pitch in, to be part of a team and to work hard, I think is the signature, it is the hallmark of successful people. Second, know who you are. Find the things that you really enjoy and you think, gosh, I'm good at that, and invest. Invest in yourself. Believe in you, and be fearless in that. When you do those things, there'll be bad days. We all have failures. I've certainly had more than my share, perhaps. But you'll also see enormous successes that flow from that. Not every day, but often. The combination of knowing who you are and working really hard is a really potent combination for people to be successful, however they define it. Some will say I make more money. Some will say I'm part of an important organization making change in the world. However one defines success for themselves, those two things will lead to more of it.
Okay. Have you ever regretted your choice?
Which one? You mean a decision that I've made?
Yes.
No, I don't spend much time looking backwards. I've certainly made mistakes in my life, things that, gosh, I'd say if I had that to do over again, I would do that differently. Goodness, even as my time as Secretary of State, we didn't get it right every day. But I don't spend much time looking back other than to acknowledge that, hey, we could have done that better, figuring out why we didn't do it better, and trying to make sure we got it better tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your great insight.
Well, it was wonderful to be with you.
Please come back
I will.
next year.
I will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.